Good evening, everybody. I'm Theo Anagnostopoulos, and I would like to welcome you in the panel, Who Owns Science? Have you ever had a stomachache that you had to look up in the internet what could be the possible causes of your symptoms? Have you ever thought whether you should eat genetically modified corn and wanted to look up for some information? Have you ever looked up again for information to see what would happen if there are any side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine? These are all examples of people trying to access science. This is going to be a little bit of what we're going to talk about here tonight, but also we're going to talk about inclusivity, about the generation of fake news, about patents, and about how we can engage citizens in science policy. But let's take things from the beginning. As I said, I'm Theo, and I'm very honored to be here for this panel, which is co-organized by the Bayer Foundation and SciCo. But for this panel, we have a lineup of three superstars. And I would like to start by introducing them with a professor of sociology. In fact, she's the professor of sociology at Humboldt University Berlin. She's also the president of Berlin Social Science Center. And amongst the tens of honors and awards that I could see in her CV, I've decided to just mention a couple of them which are relevant to this evening's talk. In fact, one of them is relevant, the other one is a little bit irrelevant, but we'll see. The relevant one, she's a member of the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council by the UK government. The less relevant one is that she's a member of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences.
Thank you for this clear order.
By the Holy Father. So let's welcome Professor Jutta Allmendinger.
Thank you.
Now, we have another very inspiring young lady with us who is a leader in her field. She's a chemist. She always had a passion for chemistry. And she's running her own group at Leibniz-Institut for Catalysis. She used to be a competitive swimmer and all that. Really? Okay. It's a pity we don't have a swimming pool here tonight. And all that passion, she's taken it into science. She also loves to teach and train the trainers, other teachers, in chemistry, in STEM education. So let's welcome Jola Pospech. Doctor, I forgot to mention. And last but not least, we have a scientist with us who is quite accomplished. He has more than 70 publications himself, including ones in Nature and Science, before taking up the head of research and innovation in several companies. And he's currently the head of Bayer Pharma Research and Development and a lecturer of biotechnology at ETH Zurich. So let's welcome Dr. Christian Rommel. So with this panel, we can start our discussion today. But before that, I would like to share something from my experience as a science engager of the last 12 years. As I said earlier, I've been running SciCo since 2008 and 9. For the first 10 years of the life of this organization, I had to explain to everybody why it is important to communicate science. People were always telling me, oh, this is so cool, what you're doing, so nice with the kids, it's very, very nice. It was always a bonus. It was never something really important. Until this catastrophe, the disaster of COVID came. all of a sudden, what we were doing became extremely important. And it's no surprise that in April 2020, this article came in the New York Times, where basically for the first time we could see the scientists as being the superheroes. And why did this happen? Because in eras of crisis, everybody needs a hero, somebody who's reliable, somebody who knows what they're talking about, and somebody who is a leader. So this transformation was a transformation for our work as well. So with this, the next slide, please. Let me say it again. COVID is a catastrophe, okay? But let's try and see some positive sides into all this. What happened? In the field of health, we now call it the health age because of the mega transformations that took place throughout the last 2 years. So I would like to ask our panelists, if I give you a minute each, could you come out with a positive outcome for science and one positive outcome for you personally throughout the COVID era? And I will start with Jutta.
Well, positive. Thank you very much for this very nice introduction. And sorry that you lost your bonus. So on a positive side for science, of course, is that people around the civil society understand much more why so much money is spent for science and why we need to finance long-time basic research. I mean, this is very, very obvious. Second, very, very obvious thing is that we need good science communicators, and that science is not science, but that we need to have a discourse between the sciences. It's not just health sciences. It's also sociology, it's also psychology, it's also the quite different impact of different parts of the society. And for me personally, is that I met more of my neighbors than ever before. Whether this is for good or for bad, but this is what happened.
Thank you.
And I was asked for many, many favors, which I would never have asked before as well.
Thanks, Jola. Jutta, sorry. Jola.
Yeah. So for me, what was really nice to see is that I've never heard the term science or scientist more often in public radio or on television. I don't have a television, but I assume it was pretty frequently mentioned there too. So that was cool since I'm a scientist myself. And also considering the years before, like climate change came into the focus of more and more people, which was actually my biggest childhood fear. I was always afraid that the polar caps will melt and then we will all drown. Maybe that's why I learned swimming at an early age. But yes, in 2019, the climate movement was so strong, and in 2020, you looked into the sky and I didn't barely see any plane, and I loved that.
Mm. Yeah, that was a major transformation in people's behavior, at least temporarily.
Temporarily.
We will see, yeah. Christian, please.
Yeah, so similarly, the momentum we have right now, right, in the dialogue with society about medical innovation and science. I hope we really, as there is a saying, let's not have a good crisis to go to waste, is that we can really capture this. The other one for us is that we've seen unprecedented partnership between the health agencies, the openness to advance and improve medicines ever faster. We see partnership between competitors that we have become collaborators in the industry because of the need and the urgency. We have now experienced that the power of, we call this decentralized clinical trials, where the medicine goes to the patients and is not inviting the patients to come to a medical center. The digital part of this, I think we really, I wouldn't say it's a revolution, but there is so much now going on that we can harness and harvest for the future. It's tremendous. On a personal level, you learn a lot about the importance of community and personal interaction when you are interacting virtually. I think there are a lot of good stuff, but I think also a lot of us misses few things, and I hope we carry them forward and reinstall a sense of personal interactions. And one example is when you go on such virtual Zoom calls and you say, hey guys, and everybody should speak up, and then everybody please go on mute. And I think this is this common behavior. You have an interest in someone's thought, but there is something intrinsically actually saying go on mute. And there's a lot of reflection and learning how we work with each other, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. And with regards to the first part that you mentioned, this is also a personal feeling. I was reading that similarly to the Cold era, the Cold War back in the 60s and the 70s, that all that race at the time created a lot of innovation in the field of the space industry. The last 2 years have been called the health era because of all this transformation that you mentioned, which is here to stay, hopefully. Yes. So, okay, thank you. Let's move on to our first game of this evening. Basically, it's called Guess the Data. We will show you data from the survey of the Eurobarometer. This is a survey conducted by the funded by the European Union. It's the latest version. The results came out 2 months ago. The base is 37,000 people all across Europe, all 27 EU countries plus 11 more countries. The age group is above 16, and there's no bias to who replies to those. So this survey is going to show us some perceptions and some beliefs about science understanding. So in the first slide, I'm going to, all of the statements you're going to see are all true, they're all correct. I would like our panelists to guess the percentage of people who answered correctly, okay? So let me start with the first one, which is, the continents on which we live have been moving for millions of years and will continue to move in the future. So Christian, what percentage of people answered this correctly, do you think?
Every other one, maybe 50%.
Pandora? It's 82%, and you can see the voting of 2005 to the same question was 86%. This year was 82%. Okay, you did relatively well on this one, but hopefully I will give you another chance.
You're very polite, Theo.
Now, Jola, humans did not live at the same time as the dinosaurs. How many answered this correctly?
Depends on whom you consider a dinosaur, but well, I would hope for 90%.
Like the ones we have in the museum?
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to see them. 90%?
Yeah, that's quite hopeful. Pandora, 66%. So that means that 34% of the people in Europe, they believe that dinosaurs are pets. You know, it's amazing. If it wasn't such a strong survey, I would doubt this data, but it is very reliable. Okay, let's go to Jutta. The oxygen we breathe comes from plants?
80%.
Exactly, it's 82%. Don't get overexcited. Okay, Christian, antibiotics do not kill viruses.
60%.
55%. Well done. That was very close. And I would like to give the last question to Jutta because of the type of the question. It says, I'm sorry, Jola, the methods used by the natural sciences and the social sciences are equally scientific.
Low number, 40% at maximum.
Oh, you've seen the survey before. It's 47%. Well done. Okay.
Actually,
so
yeah.
This is just a little bit of an introduction.
This is what I know because everybody told me that I'm not working scientifically.
Well. Okay, so this is a perception that I think that there needs to be work done on this, right?
Well, in general, but it relates to both.
Okay. So the reason we did this exercise is, of course, we introduced gamification in our panel, but also this is the next slide we want to basically discuss mostly, which is when.
But may I interrupt?
Of course.
Are there huge differences across countries and by age and things like this?
I cannot tell you about age, but I can tell you that there are differences, and this is a good opportunity for me to tell you that, for example, my country, Greece, and also Cyprus, they were the two worst ones in the perception of antibiotics. We were like 80% what was the question again?
Antibiotics don't kill viruses.
Yeah, so it was like, so basically we had this culture of taking antibiotics as pills for everything, and this shows in this, yes, there are differences between countries. It's a very extensive survey they've done. Okay, let's go to the following slide. Now, who answered correctly? Who answered correctly in the previous questions? And this is going to lead us to a discussion about inclusivity of science. So all these are summaries. I'm going to read them through. These are summaries of how they answered. And I will explain exactly how they answered. But it was mainly respondents who used the internet frequently. They were right. Mostly right. It was respondents who left education later, more educated people. It was people who were relatively wealthy. They didn't have any difficulty paying the bills. It was people who had a prior interest in science and technology. There were managers, white-collar workers, students, and self-employed people, and men. Now, let me be a little...
Oh, they have more time than women.
Yeah, that's true. I would like to be a little bit more specific about how these answers came up. So for the example of men are more likely than women to give more than 8 correct answers of the total 11 questions, and the difference was 29% versus 19%. But still, men scored higher than women.
Yeah, but what does this mean, a very correct answer? Now we are really approaching the topic.
Yeah.
Do they really have to guess the exact percentage?
No, they have...
So all of us would be wrong then?
You're right. You have these levels of very much... this is 1 to 5 basically are the answers. So 5 is the closest one.
I understood.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
5 categories.
5 categories, where 5 is the highest one. Okay, so let's discuss a little bit about these outcomes. And I would like to start with you. I will all give you about 2 minutes each to express your opinions about this topic, and then we see how it goes. Please.
I have questions to all of them, actually, because respondents who use the internet every day, then the question is what kind of internet resources do they use? I mean, are they social networks? Are they Wikipedia stuff? Or are those newspapers? I mean, this is a really fussy category.
Yeah, you're right. Coincidentally, we've inserted another slide later on where they show us Where do they get this information?
Okay, so next one, not surprising, because the longer you are in education, the more you learn from science and of science. No surprise about this. Respondents who never almost have difficulty paying this is very much connected to education. The more education you have, on average, the more earning capacities you have. Then, of course, interest is related to knowledge. No question about this. Managers is also collinear with the other ones, and men do have more time. It was under 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I will.
It's not related to education, it's related to time. And because men are covered more by most of the studies compared to women.
Okay.
No, I mean, they know that.
I will come back to you. I would like to ask Jola's view on this, because you lead in your group, you're into science yourself. I don't know whether you want to answer on this exact to comment on these results, or you want to talk about your personal experience of being a female scientist.
Yeah. I have one question concerning this. So correct answer means they guessed right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
in those 5 categories.
Yeah, so you don't feel that the term correct is correct.
Yeah.
So the role of men and women in science, of course, is very pressing question and has to change. So we are born 50-50 men and women, and then through the if we rise through the ranks, then the decline of female co-workers is imminent. So if we now I'm an assistant professor, and we have team meetings in the Leibniz-Institut. And sometimes I look through the room and there are 20 people in there, and I'm the only woman. So this is a little strange. Right now, actually, in my lab, I have 6 co-workers, and 5 of them are women. So this is awesome. Most of the time, so we have 6 female co-workers and 1 man, and then the response is often like, "Oh, this poor guy, so you need to hire a man next." So, but this is actually the normal percentage in reverse. So, in science, out of 7 persons, 6 are male. And nobody says, "Oh, you need to increase the percentage of female co-workers," and the woman might feel discriminated. And now, people are telling me this, "Oh, this poor guy," and actually he's a very strong personality, and it's also for me it's very important for him that he never feels discriminated, and I also communicate that in reverse, so. When I started my group, I also always said there are no genders in the group. So we are all just people that enjoy science, and everything else has second priority. And I wish that for...
But this is the general population, or it's not just scientists?
Yes, it's the general population. Christian?
Well, I think it triggers concerns. First, if you talk about the education of science and innovation in medicine, we talk about COVID-19 and new vaccines, and half of the people believe you coexisted with dinosaurs. I mean, what a gap to fill. The other one is it doesn't represent equality, and I think it's a huge concern if education is linked to your financial situation, to whether where you were born, how you were raised. I mean, this is profound in such a simple access of information. So I'll take a lot of concerns from that, I have to say.
I see.
Yeah. Fake news probably plays a big role. If the internet is a source of education, and whatever news travel faster and better is completely directing, and then you end up with such a mess in education. So that is really, that's alarming, actually. Hopefully you'll find some other good stuff to talk now.
Okay. Would you like to add on something on this particular topic?
I would like to.
Of course, please.
But I don't want to.
No, go ahead.
So what you just said, I think it's will probably get a little worse now, since you rely so much on technology to have access to science. And a lot of people don't know that lectures at the university are actually free to go to. You just need to be enrolled to take the exam and to get a degree, but you can go to every lecture you like. But now it's more and more difficult because you need an access link to join a hybrid class or whatnot. So, yeah, that's a little bit disturbing.
So I didn't get the point. That is becoming more accessible or less accessible?
Less accessible.
Less accessible.
Yeah.
I see.
So, well, of course, I'm always interested in the differences across countries, because the educational systems are very much different. In the moment children learn about science in the US, it's it's early. I mean, if you are around Palo Alto or in those very well situated high-tech environments, my son had to learn about it at the age of 3 or 4, and as a good German mother, I was frantic about it because I thought he's way too young. So, I mean, we can actually learn. We need to be concerned, yes, but on the other hand, we can learn a lot from the standard deviation across countries, where people with a low education can do better compared to the average, and where they do worse compared to the average, and then adjust educational systems. And this is what we know, but what we don't do.
Right. Yeah, no, you can't.
So it's in our hands.
Yes, you can't deny that. This has implications, I think.
That's actually a very good point, that if we were analyzing individual countries on this, we would see much greater deviations. I think it's relatively homogenized, the way that it's presented in one slide.
Yes, and then we later obviously talk about causality, which is another point behind those data.
Yeah.
I guess.
We might get the chance to talk about it a bit later.
Yeah.
Okay, so we change the topic now. I'm going to show you a slide.
This is sort of quite something. It's really work sitting here.
Well, yes, like a. You mean on the stool?
No, no. Because we are getting asked so many questions about our knowledge.
Have you been on the panel before together?
No.
No.
Otherwise, I would be better prepared.
I would have answered it with 90% or something.
Okay, let's go to this. I'll tell you this story here. We have the 2018 Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, George Smith. He developed an elegant method known as a phage display that he uses bacteriophages to evolve new proteins. After winning the Nobel Prize, he came up with some statements, and they were mostly about the intellectual property rights owned by pharmaceutical companies, and more specifically, I will read the text which is written in bold there. To these two questions: did the companies who developed and produced the COVID-19 vaccines deserve patent monopolies for their vaccines? And was the promise of patent monopolies the best way for governments to foster development of the vaccines? His answer was that in both questions, he says no. And the reason he says no is because this type of work requires not just a few years that a pharmaceutical company needs to put on to create an innovation and a patent, but it relies on a whole century of innovations and dozens of different research groups. So he says, in the end, that a better way to stimulate vaccine development would have been through public funding. And I would like to hear Christian's view on this. And okay, I can see a lot of you smiling, which is nice.
That is a very complex matter. It is emotional, and I have a lot of understanding for that. But I would think I have an empathetic no to his no, and I explain to you why. First, I think it is very valid to say that the government should invest in the advance of science for, massive health problems. That is undebatable. But I'm on a true belief that the efforts and the genius of discovery and inventions need to be protected in order to make it possible to facilitate innovation. If you allow me to say that now we think we see and experience the massive impact of the COVID-19 development of certain companies. But if we deconstruct this and reverse engineer, it took them many years to get there. And for this, they needed a lot of financial resources, investments. Yeah? Some companies worked on the development of mRNA-based vaccines over 20 years. And they had to raise a lot of money to do this, and they could only access those financial resources because of private investors who see their investment in return. And they can only do this if the inventions are protected. Otherwise, there is no thesis for any investment. So one thing, I think we live in a system where innovation is protected by intellectual property, which really enables advancement of innovation. I would also invite us to think, if you consider some of the most or strongest places of innovation, like think about Harvard or MIT as a wellspring of creativity, talents, and discoveries. And those places are in such a strong position and can attract talent because of their infrastructure, capabilities, environment, brilliant teachers, and so forth. Their funding is, you may not know, 80% run by their managing their intellectual property. So the world depends, I think, on innovation. And most of our biggest problems haven't been addressed yet because we haven't discovered yet enough. So we need innovation. But I do think protection of innovation to drive it forward is very, very important. So it's really tricky. And then I'll leave you one more. I know you thought 2 minutes, so be brutal to me.
Go ahead.
I think it's also not as trivial to think that you can easily copy in discoveries in inventions. So making a COVID-19 vaccine the way companies like BioNTech have mastered that, you cannot just give a recipe of cooking to someone. It's actually super dangerous what could happen if it's not available in a regulated or protected manner. Because those scientists, those companies literally worked on this 10, 20 years, day in, day out. So it is not as trivial to email someone a recipe. I think it's much better to invest and make the vaccine rapidly, globally, to everyone available by investing in companies who have mastered that. So that is, I think, that's why it's a complicated matter. But I'm a true champion of the idea that the world we're living in, discoveries and invention need to be protected in order to drive them forward. Because the resource created is a large fraction is reinvested in innovation. It's a vicious cycle going forward. If we disrupt this, we will pay a price of innovation for the world. I'm absolutely convinced about that.
I would like to emphasize, though, on his point, on that particular phrase, that I understand the way you're expressing. I'm not going to take a position myself here as a moderator. So, but how do you answer to the fact that he says that the actual research, even though if somebody went from, I don't know, if the journey is from 1 to 10,
right,
assuming that a pharmaceutical company started the journey from 4 to 10 and took it to 10, how about 0 to 4?
Yes.
What happens there?
I don't know where you draw the line. It's infinite, right? Because everything builds on something. We can go back to your heritage. We can go back to Aristotle or Socrates. I don't know where we start, where one thing created another one. I do think the way that you can define protectable inventions is defined by a process and review of, rigor, and it is investigated by an expert panel to say this is an invention that can be protected. And everything builds on everything in life, and I don't think you can draw a line and say you needed to depend on. That doesn't work for me.
Okay, Jola, would you like to comment?
Yes, I can comment on like 2 or 3 points. So Smith said that's a better way to what did you say with the vaccine? The vaccine development would be facilitated by funding basic research, right? So, of course, funding basic research is not as easy to get. So, the percentage of proposals that are actually funded are rather low among different panels, like DFG. If you're lucky, it's 25%, or ERC grants are highly competitive. So there is a question, maybe 5 to 10% get a funding. And then there's the question whether the majority of the ideas are not funding worthy, or if there's just not enough funding available. Yeah. So
it wouldn't really work, you think, in that way with the public funding?
You try to acquire funding, and then you get 1 or 2 students funded, and so in the positions that at the universities, for instance, where these ideas really rise. So this is step 1, right, of your 1 to 10 scale, and there should be a little bit more funding available to follow different ideas. So.
Okay.
Yes.
Lady, please.
So I think that this is not necessarily the case. I mean, you are absolutely right that when we look at public funding for science, that we spend more and more and more and more money for 2 or 3 or at a maximum 4-year projects, which is of course not the time needed for do really basic long-term projects and developments and foster innovation. This needs to be changed, and this is one concern which we have right now in the coalition building and all the discourses around who is getting the Ministry of Education and Science, that the project time gets shorter and shorter. And this also would mean that the public area is less competitive to private research, which concerns me a lot. What also concerns me is that we, in part, work on the same issues without knowing from each other, publicly and privately. So it's a question, how do you increase the knowledge, who is working on what? And I would like to come to this point later in the discussion, because this is all about good scientific work. Then, of course, we have the problem that we really do not invest enough money in what we call science policy, that we do not enable poorer countries to come up with those innovative forces because they simply do not have the money. And therefore, we have to think about this developmental issue as well. So not just looking that they have enough and don't starve, but also that they have the capacities for doing research. And this must be at the front of how we think about those questions.
Okay. Christian, would you like to answer?
Two things came to mind when listening to both of you. One is you can't be so descriptive on funding research, because everything starts with basic research. Right? If you deconstruct again the story of mRNA, it goes back to the discovery of the genetic code and how it translates into the building blocks and the role of mRNA and so forth. So this is all basic research. The utility and the application to do vaccines is an invention that was protected. I actually really think if it was not practical, the vaccine would not be available today. Yeah, it would, so it has to be a sense of appreciation. And the other one is, of course, the private and public has to work way better together. And it is about the dialogue and education of society. And also the industry has to work way better, which we happen to see now in the pandemic crisis, is the pre-competitive partnerships, pre-competitive knowledge sharing, data sharing, in the interest of advancing the science faster. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have a tremendous window of opportunity here that we don't know whether we will capture it, but it's right now there. And I think discussions like yours today catalyze those.
Well, it also means that we publish earlier, or that open access will be extended, and that we also let to know each other on what we are working and what did not work, and not just what works. And all those things, would provide more equality in having the possibility of success.
Agree.
We'll come to this topic about open access of journals in the following slides. I would like to highlight what you said, Christian, with regards to the collaboration which was much intensified throughout the COVID era. Wouldn't it not have been a fantastic opportunity to do the same for climate change? It was that immediate response that the whole world had to take to the pandemic. And for the first time, there was not so much patent discussion. There was so much sharing of data between the public, the corporations, everybody, and that worked so well. From a macro perspective, it worked really well, exceptionally well for the COVID-19. If you consider that basically the virus was kind of first mentioned in December 19. By January 2020, we had it sequenced, and we had instructions on citizens all around the world how to act. We could digitalize where everybody is, and there was a vaccine out in 2 months, which became official in 6 months. So this is unprecedented for human beings. Last pandemic, 1918, it killed millions of people. If we had the same behavior as back in 1918 it was, then it would have eliminated most of the planet today. So it was a fantastic expression of collaboration. And let's see whether this can be sustainable somehow.
Well, I mean, the SARS virus has been studied since decades, actually. I mean, it wasn't like this. And we had this very famous 2010 paper telling us about the consequences of the SARS-2 virus, which nobody took serious. I mean, there are some...
Okay, I'm generalizing a little bit, but
yeah, very much so.
They could have sequenced it in one day if they wanted to, however, right?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things were much faster. I mean, no question about this, but the history of the SARS virus is a very long one.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to a very similar topic, which is this example I'm going to go through now. It's the case of Jacob Sims. Jacob Sims was a patient back in the early zeros with the so-called mad cow disease. This is otherwise known as CJD. This is a very deadly neurodegenerative disease. You have a life expectancy of up to a year. And what his father did at the time, somehow he got access to the latest medical research findings. So he found out about this drug, pentosan polysulfate, which was at the time being used experimentally on animals. And he claimed that he wanted to administer this to his son, and he took it to court, and he won the legal case. The drug was given to his son, and the son lived for another 10 years, and he became an ambassador for the disease. He was the longest living patient with mad cow disease. And this ignited a whole discussion about open science and open access to journals. Inspired by this example, I would like you to hear your views on open science. Who would like to go first? I don't have any preference.
Well, I would first distinguish between the diagnosis that this is indeed Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease. I think this would be very, very hard to find it out for yourself using the internet. So now, the other thing is knowing that you have this disease, and then it all depends on the quality which is published on the internet. So whether or not you follow strict rules on quality of papers and things like this. So.
I think this particular case study is more about him accessing scientific journals.
Well, then I don't have any reservations about it. I just wanted to make this difference that it's not about trying to find out which disease you have, which I think it's much, much harder, and then which cure probably helps or not. And this is about the politics of journals and how they publish and what they publish,
yes.
and the quality of publication, review processes, and all we know about open data.
Exactly. When I was doing my PhD 20 years ago, everything was locked. We had to have subscriptions for everything. Nowadays, especially after the COVID-19, 37% of publications, I'm talking about scientific journals, okay? They are open. What is your view on this?
For us at Bayer, this is an incredibly important topic to have data transparency and access to data and information, because you have to build the trust, and with this you get confidence in the work we do for patients. So I think we see in a lot of evolution and development in the direction of open access and transparency. That is in one way you talk about access of data. We see now that we will get the support from agencies to get drugs approved based on real-world data evidence. And you can only work with this if you make data in open access available. So it is a topic, yet you have to maintain quality of data access. You have to take scientific integrity of the data. You can't just download data without providing guidance what the insights are and what is meaning of the data. Yet I don't think we could do service and have the inclusiveness and transparency and trust of the society of developing medicines for society without going the direction of data transparency and access. We have to involve the patients. If you make medicines for patients, you have to make now medicines with the patient, to bring patients on board, listen to them, and that is often facilitated by data access. So it's a great moment in history of humankind again that we will change this.
But assuming you do somehow manage to fund all the journals and you open up everything, there's no more subscription for Science or Nature or whoever, how do you train the citizens? What difference does it make to the citizens who are non-scientists and trained to read the methodologies and everything? I will give the word to Jola and then perhaps come back to you.
Yeah, so scientific and non-scientific communication are really important, and so in the journals that are hidden behind a paywall, like Nature and Science are, so sometimes they're open access publications, but for the open access, I'm a big advocate for open access publications, but the review process defines if it's good or semi-good work or data. So the peer review process where the peers in your fields comment on your work is very important, and most of the time it should enhance the quality of the paper that's later published. And then the communication to the not that trained audience is also important, and usually there are small excerpts that describe the work that was published in the specialized journal. And this becomes more and more important, I think, to break this down that everybody understands what it's about. And I think this is much better now after or during the pandemic than it was before. Or as you said, you experience the same. It's yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jutta, would you like to?
Well, as I said before, open access is not open access. You read to develop standards before you do this. And it's a WZB one researcher, his name is McCartan Humphreys, who worked together with others on exactly this topic. And this article has been published already in 2015 in Science, promoting an open research culture. And there he really makes the argument for transparency, for openness, and for reproducibility, but under certain conditions. And those conditions are really very, very important, because otherwise you get all this garbage in the net, and this can be really harmful for people. So you have to have this quality control, and you have to incentivize the researchers differently than we incentivize our researchers in the moment. So not simply publish results where you find differences, but also those who no differences are found. Please give them credits, not just for citations, but also for the methods and for the development and things like this. I mean, this is really a worthwhile reading paper, which is at the very substance of this discussion of open science. But given that we really handle this with care, which is not done everywhere, then of course we have to reverse what publishers usually get as money in selling the journals to the people who have to pay for their own research, and this shouldn't be done out of their own pockets. So we need to think about this in funding research, and I do not see much progress on that.
May I, Theo, to build on that? I do think there's a difference between open access for just information versus making access of good information, peer-reviewed information. Right? Otherwise, in preparation of our meeting today, I was introduced to the word infobesity, and which could be a great foundation for fake news. And we've seen this in the COVID pandemic, where non-peer-reviewed, unexpert, or whatever motivated information has really irritated and had put people at harm and at risk.
Exactly.
Right? So I think we have to differentiate between access to peer-reviewed, rigorous, and relevant information, but not opening the gate for, I quote you now, Rita, on the garbage download and creating infobesity that holds innovation and science and progress back rather than accelerating it. So it is not, you raise great things, great topics, but the answer isn't as simple as often.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't want to use it as an excuse.
There's one new direction they're taking. It used to be the peer review used to be done by usually two reviewers per article. The newest direction is to let it open and be reviewed by the scientific community. Also, another direction is to pre-publish, as you said, to show the methodology before you get the results that you want. So you get, this is even more fair, I think, that you develop a methodology which is reviewed along the way. Jola, would you like to say something before we leave the topic?
No, let me just, because this fits so very nicely. I mean, it's not just pre-publish. I mean, this means that a paper is accepted and that I publish it before the journal comes out. I mean, this is what we understand with pre-publishing.
No, it's showing the methodology before it's actually going to be published or not.
Exactly, and sharing that you are working on particular issues. This I find very important, because then you find out which other groups or whatever that she is working on a similar or is applying for money to work on a similar topic than other groups worldwide. And this, I think, will intensify innovation considerably. Not keeping the secret.
Yeah.
I prefer open access, peer-reviewed articles over pre-publishing. Yeah, I think this is worth it to wait for the reviews, what your peers think about the work. And otherwise, there's really a lot, and it's very difficult even for experts to just extract the things. And then afterwards, if you may find an interesting seminal pre-published work, and then you need to keep track what the final article actually looks like, and it might change a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why the Nobel Prizes went in economics went to exactly those people to which they went, because they were making those causal claims that much of our research is simply wrong, because it shows correlated but not causal effects, which can be hugely harmful, in particular in medicine.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Let's since you already mentioned it, let's move on to the topic of info-obesity. Basically, let's define info-obesity a little bit here for our audience. It's a relatively new word, and it means it's a concept of information overload when all data is open and accessible by anyone, anywhere, at any time, mainly through social media channels. When one has too much information, he or she can not always filter out the right information for effective decision-making, or cannot focus on what is meaningful for their specific purpose. And also, it's very likely to create fake news. Let's also see on this slide the sources of information according to the Eurobarometer. So you can see that 63% is coming from television or streaming. So that's the main pillar. The second one is social media, and then you have 14% radio and podcasts, and 13% online encyclopedias. So let's talk about the danger of info-obesity and the generation of fake news, especially since we agree on open science and journals. So, okay, we're providing the scientific facts. Let's see how we can protect our audiences.
Well, I mean, if you watch television, or if you, in particular, if you watch television or TV or whatever, you see more and more that they refer to the sources and the data, and that they even sometimes provide access to the data so that you can replicate it. This is a big progress which has been made over the last couple of years, and therefore I'm not very surprised about this. Well, those 14% ratio, including podcasts, is very, very low compared to 29% online social networks. But at the other hand, I thought that online social networks is much, much higher, because this in particular creates this overload, which, by the way, in my opinion, the highest danger of this is that you lose trust in science, because you do not know whom to follow, and therefore you do not follow anyone, and you do this, what is worst for science, that you think that there is no truth, that there is no right answer, and this is sort of the end of all.
I think what you mentioned, the keyword trust, is a very important element. There's a lot of studies that are showing that people, for example, the people who don't vaccinate, is because necessarily they don't have access to data. In fact, they all have access to data. It's because they haven't been influenced by somebody they trust. And this is how people are misled quite frequently. If somebody they trust is on the wrong track, then they follow him. I would like to I can see you nodding a lot, Christian.
Well, we know all what we're talking about. We've been in a situation where someone, with a lot of access to people, advised that if you drink detergent or put it into your veins, you get rid of COVID. I mean, this is a danger. I think right now we will learn how to regulate this too. I do think there will be a development of how we, citizens, society, and regulators, governments deal with people that unconstrained make fake information, put people at risk. We see it already happening. But you mentioned, Rita, when you are in the business, in the purpose of making medicines, then it is incredibly important to have an approach of false information. And one is building trust. And that comes back to how you include society and patients in your work, how you have open access to data. Will they listen more to you because you have trust? And I think if I have the privilege to be part of a company of 150, almost 160 years of contributing important medicines to humankind, and I think there's an element of trust. But we have to leverage this to our purpose to help people to understand. But I'm massively concerned if information comes out and advises people who suffer, someone from cancer or someone from COVID, then it's misguided and risks lives. So there needs to be, again, an approach to this. And you can't prevent it or avoid it, but I think you can steer it in the favor.
Direction, yeah.
And I think we need to have a collective approach to this, to build this trust.
And Jola?
I think it's very important to focus on where to pick up the person that's interested in certain information. Because they can easily get frustrated if it's too high level, which just does not mean by any means that they are stupid and will never understand it. It's just you need to break it down and start at a different point or rephrase it. And I guess that's done in television. There is different levels of information that they provide. With a podcast, you are usually, if you subscribe, you have a interest prior to subscribing, so it's more specialized.
Yeah. You wanted to add something?
Well, I just wanted to make it even worse, because it's not just about losing trust in science. It's also trust in losing. It's also the possibility that you lose trust in politics, and this is even worse. And this all brings us back to communication and explaining why you handle things as you do handle these. Why in state 1 people can go to school, and in state 2 people can't go to school. Why children have to wear masks at school and adults don't have to wear masks, and all those things which we have not very well explained. So we need to have many more people like you do.
It's multifactorial, I agree. Thank you. It's multifactorial, the whole topic, and the politics is something that we cannot hide. I think, in my opinion, there's two elements. One is you need to train the audience. If they know about scientific reasoning and failure and success, when you come out in March 2020 and you tell them, I would like you to all wear gloves. So the government bought tons of gloves. And then 3 months later, oh, sorry, it wasn't gloves, it was masks that you should be wearing. And the scientists can say that because they have collected data and found out that gloves do not work really. They don't do very much, but masks do. And if you are trained on this and you see the data, you're going to be convinced. Okay, science is dynamic. But then comes the government, who bought tons of gloves throughout the first 3 months, and they also probably aligned with some corporations that produce gloves. This is a fictional example, by the way, I'm using.
Not very much so, but...
As I say, some stuck up detergent suddenly, yeah.
So exactly, and then you have politics intervening with science. that you have to wear both masks and gloves until the gloves run out, in which case you can wear only the mask. Anyway, you will like this. You will find this. I think I found it fascinating in the Eurobarometer. I'm going to read it to you now. It's on this topic. 3 in 10 people believe in conspiracy theories, such as the idea that viruses have been produced in government laboratories to control our freedom. And there's another one that there is the cure in the same study. I haven't got it in my notes that there is a cure for cancer, but they don't show it to us. 3 out of the 10 people out of the 37,000 Europeans being questioned on these believe in conspiracy theories. So it's not easy to say, oh, yes, but it's not me. Well, it's not you, but it's 30% of the population, is your neighbor. So this is an innate kind of urge for human beings to create conspiracy theories, and I think there is an evolutionary basis on this. But it's not an issue to discuss right now. But based on this, we have to protect very much, since there is this tendency, we have to protect the citizens somehow. And this brings me to the following question, which is exactly this, which is, how can we create an active role for citizens? Okay, let's take all this, what we've said so far, into practice. So I would like to be more specific in my question. We often talk about science research and data feeding into citizens, but could we actually reverse the equation? Can we offer citizens an active role in science policies, research and innovation? And if yes, how? I would start with you this time.
Yeah, I think nobody ever should stop to ask questions. So always ask why. This is what brought me into science as a kid. I always asked why is that? And now I'm thinking about electrons and atoms. And yeah, it's important that you not get frustrated, what I said before, but just change the perspective and the angle and keep asking until you really understood what you wanted to know.
This is very nice, but how do you cultivate this?
So you can encourage this, for instance, at university. It doesn't need to be a frontal lecture where we just keep telling the students what they should know, but ask questions and check if they really got you. And this is something that you can always do. Like if somebody approaches you and asks a question, sometimes you see in their eyes like, okay, they stop listening and they don't understand, and you need to find a way, a mutual level for communication, and this is a challenge on both sides.
Thank you. Christian?
Well, I thought the answer to this in part is where you started, when you shared some facts from the survey. In part it can be addressed by investing in education, because when you are informed, I think you have greater interest and you know how to deal with data. The other one is how we also from a company perspective, how we work together with the audience that is so much of interest to us, scientists and patients. Are they included in our process? Right? Do we share the data again? Can patients be part of our work more? Can academics or industry have to get out of their ivory tower silo thinking and see and leverage this and the importance, and then working with journalists, because where is the difference communicating science between facts and fictions? Can we be in a better partnership together? Will you get our interest as much as will you reach out? But I do think it is a responsibility that includes almost everyone, governments, the private part, the journalists. We have to have an ethos. And we have to have, I think, increased standards, moral and scientific rigor and standards in communication. it's a responsibility. And so I would reach out and say, can we share and adhere to our standards of communicating science and data and facts?
Thank you, but I would like to make it a bit more tangible. We want citizens to get involved into science policy somehow. They want. This is what they answer in all surveys. And it's more fair if they also have a say into that. How do we do that?
Well, first of all, you have to lay the groundwork of all of this and assign more hours in schools for science. I mean, this. I think it's most necessary. We do not learn about the basic elements of science at schools, in Germany at least. And this needs to be changed, and by this we can enable people much more than we do right now. And this also means that we reach more people and engage them in education. And at least in Germany, we lose each year 20%, and it increased the number who do not get over a very basic level of education. And so this also means that, I should have started differently, we still do not really understand which people misbelieve in science and why they tend to conspiracy theories. So I think that we have to research it much more, why this happened. And then, of course, we can increase the hours spent in teaching them about science at school, in further education and things like this. We can increase the way we bring science to the people and not just waiting until they come to a museum or to the social science center or listen to talks and things like this. I mean, this is a minority of people who is getting the information by this, and you showed this figure before. So, and if I think about my fields, I mean, we have surveys, huge surveys, this Eurobarometer which you showed, I mean, it's a huge survey. But do we really bring back the answers all those people gave us and the time they spent for us getting all those results, bringing those results back to the people? No, we don't do that. And so there's a lot of things
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if I would do a survey, then I could publish sort of the aggregate, what all those people responding is. But it's entirely unlikely that I share my results with them.
But they're open, they're published.
But yeah, but my institute works a lot on migration and integration, and we're going to Neukölln and all those areas where we find many people coming from all over the world. We ask them about their experience and things like this, and then we have thousands of data, and they are published in peer-reviewed journals. We are not going to Neukölln and then presenting their own data gathered by them with their time, so that they are informed about their own results and see that they all, sort of differ, that they are not sharing the same views on things, and we do not bring them to talk together if they are of different opinions and things like this. So we can do much more bringing our results back to those people who provided us with our numbers and shared their time with us. And this is in many areas the case, and I think it would be a wonderful example to increase thought, not just the way scientists and citizens interact, but also increase the trust they have in us.
Are you aware of the citizen science movement?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, we are doing, I mean, my profession is doing a lot of citizen science because we are entirely dependent on people answering our surveys.
Okay, this is considered to be one way of engaging your audience.
Only if you bring the data back to them, because otherwise it's a form of exploitation. Sorry that I say this so hard.
Okay, what do you think about citizen science? What's your view? Christian?
I mean, it's an enormous opportunity, right, to raise the awareness and invite people in that space. And I think this exactly. I was thinking You mentioned education is done by streaming and internet. But it would be great if kids could from time to time see an advertisement on the coolness of science versus another Coca-Cola advertisement, or that soccer playing, or at least in a balanced way. That the kids could ask questions. Why is this shown? Why is this cool? We with the Bayer Foundation are involved in those movements, because obviously it's the next generation. For us, from a sustainability perspective, is incredibly important. We will run out of existence if we don't find the next cool scientist, supporting us in our efforts to make medicines.
Jola?
I think it might not be the solution to increase the hour of STEM subjects in school, but to really start teaching the pupils how to approach any question they like in a scientific manner.
Yeah.
That's a very nice conclusion.
Replication, things like what are the standards of doing good science, and at least I did not have this at school. It's still not covered.
Yeah, neither did I. And from a personal perspective, I was taught, in physics oscillations on a blackboard. It was never kind of explained to me why we're learning that, and how does this relate to a bridge you're crossing with your car and it moves. There was never any connection of science to real life, and this is what we're trying to do with our work here. And it's not just we're not trying to shift all the teenagers that we're working on to become engineers and doctors or physicists, but we're trying to cultivate the scientific method as a way of living, of challenging things. Please.
Would it be fair to say that, right now we have 3-4 major challenges: climate change, hunger, and diseases, and maybe you can add 1 or 2, but all of them can only be addressed by science. Think about that. The major issues of humankind can only be addressed by science.
So to conclude on our kind of views about engagement of citizens, I'll try and sum up what you've said. Education is very important at schools. Also, open access to scientific journals and citizen science, but when this is done in a right way, that you train them throughout the experiment. They learn throughout the procedure, and they collect data in order to be part of an experiment that they understand as well. And there was a publication, I think a couple of years ago, that together with the 5, 6, 7 authors, they also put the 500 people who collected the data in the authors, which was very nice to acknowledge their contribution. So we're moving towards the end now, and 2 more things. One, we would like some questions from you, or I don't know whether we can get any online, but are there any questions that you would like us to answer? Please, Isabella.
I have a couple questions. Oh, thank you. I have a couple questions. First of all, I would like you to repeat the person who wrote that article about open science. I would love to read up about that. The second is, I think I would even put it harder as you, for Allmendinger, with citizen science. I don't think it's necessary not only to collect data and give back to the people what they've said, but what we really want to do is to raise critical thinking by activating people, by being part of even the design of these studies, or what are the questions we're asking and what are the problems we're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So get people into the process at a very early stage until the end, when the results are published.
Yeah, so as to your second point, I entirely agree. So this is what we usually do. We have those focus groups and we learn in what ways they think about it, then we transform it into questions and then we ask those questions. But then we do not do the very last step usually. Sorry for interrupting.
In one study of WZB, and I was actually informed of the results.
I know,
so that was a good example. The other question is to you.
If you don't mind, Isabella, nice meeting you. Hi. Let other participate in studies, and you may be disappointed if I share with you that it's relatively recently, but not only at Bayer, but we do, right now when we do clinical trial study designs for testing the potential new medicines, now patients are invited into this process. Patient foundations are being asked, is this the right thing to do? Is this what you're really looking for? Can we go faster? Can we go better? How would we make the studies open to the patients in need? And it hasn't been like this. It was decided somewhere else. But right now, it is this open access. It is this invitation. If it's done for you, we need to do it with you. And this is a really new experience.
That's a good intro to my question, which is to you. You've been proposing open data to share patients' information, so patients should share their information and be part of the process on the starting end. However, on the other hand, you're asking for, or you're voting for knowledge protection at the same time. So how does that fit together? I see a problem there with open data and knowledge protection. You can't combine them, in my views.
So I do think that thanks for allowing me to perhaps clarify that to you. When you say knowledge protection doesn't mean you're not sharing, right? It's just that you protect that when you have made efforts and you have differentiate yourself from others, that you have a chance to protect your own progress, your discovery, your invention. But a patent is as rapidly made available by knowledge sharing as a publication. So knowledge is not shared. It's not prevented not to share. This is a misconception that information that is intellectual property and is protected by the mechanism of patent is not sitting somewhere and you can't access it. Not at all. It's actually better and more detailed, often shared at any scientific publication. But you're right, and when we work with patients and we need their data, there's an element, of course, also from patients' information protections. So how can you, I would almost, in a dialogue with you, if the patient needs to be involved and we need information, how could this information from a specific patient can be shared back into the public domain? And I don't know how we feel about it, but I have to say that in Germany, for instance, it's almost virtually impossible to share patients' data in order to advance science. There are other countries way more progressive, because for the common shared goal between a patient, between a company who makes medicines, and between society, there is a shared goal of, how can we progress with this information? Some governments regulate it that we don't actually leverage enough information. So we are on our own way. We have the ambition, we talk about it, but we can't walk the talk. In certain countries, in certain regions, where data information is prohibited. And I don't think it makes any sense because the patient actually wants to participate and share information, but it's not allowed to pass that on. I think it's a huge bottleneck.
Okay.
I'm sure you're dealing with this from a politics and from a policy makers. I really don't understand. I can get really emotional on this, that I don't understand why society doesn't support sharing information on diseases, on certain patients. In particular, medicine today is so personalized. Every patient has almost his own disease, and we will only understand this by sharing this information. In Germany, for instance, it's virtually impossible.
Yeah, this is another important topic. I think next year, invite us again, please. We will spend another hour and a half on
But it's great that we got a question here.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We have time to take one more. Oh, that's the article, yeah.
If we could go back to the slide you presented on access.
On access.
And in this respect, if I understood correctly, Jutta, you said that the educational systems are so different from country to country. Is that correct?
Well, that one saw, well,
Not
there
to
is
this.
a lot of...
Not to this. To this. So here education plays an important role in the outcomes of the Eurostat.
Yeah.
Would it mean that if education differs from country to country, the results of the Eurostat would differ from country to country?
Yes, indeed, it is. This is clearly the case.
And
because
in
I
this
know
case-
the German numbers, and the German numbers look quite different from those numbers. Those are the aggregate numbers of all OECD countries. And of course, I mean, it's
So-
always a question whether you trust an average or
fact,
not,
we
or
have
what an average means.
Yeah.
So in fact, to have a real view, it should be broken down by country.
Yes, but not only by country, but also by age, because younger people trust more in science than
Okay.
older people. And then, of course, by we have seen this before. Oh, yeah, it's exactly this.
And now to Christian, the next slide I think is, if you go to the next slide, yes, this one. I think I have bad news because if I know correctly, the development of the vaccine has been supported through public funding. And the
Yes.
So this is not really true what Mr.
It's not all private money, which.
So,
But no.
Yeah?
So sorry.
Yeah?
The question is,
yes.
what would you say that the royalties have been collected by the company while it has been supported by public money?
So you will,
So yeah, I would say so that the situation is worse than it would have been better to develop it through public funding because it was developed partly by public funding, but the benefits are reaped completely by the company. Is that correct? And what would you say about this?
yeah, so there is, I have to acknowledge there is, and thank you for bringing that up, there is a situation in the US where the NIH very early on recognized that the development of the vaccine could be accelerated by providing more resources. That's indeed the case. And it's undisputable that this has created a situation where public funding accelerated under the circumstances of a pandemic crisis. Yet, the discovery of the vaccine technology of this company, Moderna, was not funded by the NIH. It was once the medicine has proven to be relevant or has a chance to succeed, the NIH stepped in and accelerated the development by their funding, which is in part public funding. So it is indeed the case that under the circumstance of pandemic, the government, the NIH, stepped in to help developing the medicine.
But
as much as the partnership between Pfizer and BioNTech and companies like the partnership in providing.
Yeah, I see. I completely. Does it work? I completely see this, but the question is if public funding goes ultimately into private benefit of the company, in one way or another.
Well,
is this something to be condemned or not?
I do think that which was absolutely the right thing to do, the decision of the government in the NIH to step in and to say, let's not waste time, was not to help the company, in this case Moderna, to become faster, more profitable. It was that how could we support that this medicine goes to the US citizens and beyond. So their interest was it wasn't a dialogue between Moderna and the government. Can we make Moderna growing faster and better? It was, with the resource that the company didn't have, but the US has, can we put your muscles to play to provide those medicines faster? But I do think it is a situation that is not as straightforward here. I agree with you here.
Thank you. I would have to interrupt here because we have. I would like to give to our three panelists a minute to state a wish, which is, in an ideal world, how would you envision science's role in society? So this is a closing statement, and I would like to start with you, Jola.
I would wish that the perception of scientists isn't linked to an academic title, but also those that are not at university, so consider themselves scientists and develop very well-learned scientific methods. And
if I can convert this in other words, if we continue being babies, because all babies are scientists.
Yes.
Yes.
They are so
this
curious.
Is what they do. They experiment all the
Stay
time.
Curious.
And then comes an education system, which just starts to close off this experimentation with everything. And this is how creativity is diminished, right?
Yes, that was beautiful, but a little bit irritated. It seems like a lot of me, I haven't grown up. Go. Also,
please.
I would say that what we've seen right now, it's hopefully this continues, the interest in science. The interest in science, the respect for the efforts, and the shared understanding that, as I said, what are we really facing as big problems and diseases, and the vulnerability of human stays very high. And the only way to combat it and overcome it is by show interest, learn about it, and have respect the effort and time it takes and how little we know. Let's be all humble, how little we know and how vulnerable we are. And science is the only way to deal with that.
This is why it's so cool to be in a panel with such a high caliber speakers, because you hear these messages. Now, Jutta, it's your turn.
Well, science is still not very inclusive. We have to increase the diversity both by social background of where people come from, and that they have much more chances to really become scientists. We have to increase internationality, and we also have to increase the number of women in science. All this is very clear, and we didn't do very good on this. Second, we have to prepare people much better in upcoming crises and to enable them to live according to their standards. We are doing a lot of research where we see that people know about this climate crisis, but they don't really know what to do themselves day for day for day. And here we have to teach them much more, enabling that they can live up to the standards they have. And this also refers to digitalization. If we don't tell them which jobs will last for the 5-10 more years, then they draw back and become miserable and do not trust in anyone anymore. So prevention is really an enabling, and stop to be arrogant. I think we are too arrogant. We are not really listening to those people and why they distrust us. We don't even try to understand where they're and what their problems are.
Thank you. I hope that this discussion panel is more than just a conversation. I hope it's the beginning of something that can have somehow a future. It's something that it's nice to discuss from a theoretical point of view, but something needs to be done, and I wish that we can do something to continue in this. So at this moment, I would like to thank you very much our three guests. Jutta.
Thank you for challenging us here with all those slides.
Jola,
yes, thank you.
Christian, And I would also like to thank Dr. Carl Collins for the invitation. He first envisioned this, and of course my colleague Pandora Sifnioti, who was, and all of you for coming to attend here. So thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.